Are we ready for a word, though? That's good. Stand and turn with me to the gospel according to Luke. Luke chapter 24. Luke chapter 24. Tap or turn to Luke chapter 24. We're going to read several verses, but the context is really all of Luke 24. We ain't got time. I know you want to get to brunch. We're going to read a few verses of Luke chapter 24, beginning at verse 13. I'm going to read the New Living Translation today simply because it's plain English. You have it. Say, I got it. You want some more time? Say, wait for me. I hear you. I hear you. I'm waiting. I'll give you 15 seconds. It's on the wall, too. It is on the wall as well. Luke chapter 24, verse number 13. The Bible reads this way. That same day, two of Jesus' followers were walking to the village of Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things, Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them. But God kept them from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing so intently as you walk along?" They stopped short, sadness written across their faces. Then one of them said, Cleopas replied, "You must be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened here the last few days." "What things?" Jesus asked. "The things that happened to Jesus. A man from Nazareth," they said. "He was a prophet who did powerful miracles, and he was a mighty teacher in the eyes of God and all the people. But our leading priests and other religious leaders handed him over to be condemned to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped he was the Messiah who had come to rescue Israel. This all happened 3 days ago." Jump down to verse 31. Verse 31 says, "Suddenly their eyes were open, and they recognized him. And at that moment, he disappeared." I want to tag this text with this title, "It's Up From Here." You may be seated. It's up from here. The New Testament begins with what we call 4 Gospels. 4 Gospels. You may or may not have heard, but the Gospel is the expression, the exhortation of Jesus's life, his death, his burial, and his resurrection. But on the flip side, the Gospels are also genres. They are books in the New Testament, and we have 4 of them: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I learned to appreciate the Gospels from my mother's side of the family. At least 2 to 3 times a year, we would travel outside of Chicago to Joliet, Illinois, to hang out and spend time with family. My Aunt Rita has 4 kids, and the best part of the trip would be when all of the kids and all of the moms and the dads and the cousins and the aunts and Big Mama, we would all be in one kitchen, and the stories would break out. The stories about what happened back in the day. What happened back in the day? And somebody would begin telling the story. "Do you remember when Big Mama cooked breakfast and Ralph didn't get any?" And as soon as a story would break out, everybody would jump in. One cousin would have something to add, and then another cousin would have something else to say, and then another cousin would say, "No, it didn't happen quite like that. You got to remember, we beat him to the kitchen." And this is what I realized, that none of our stories were any less real or true. They were just different perspectives of the same story. That's what you got to understand about the Gospels, that there is no story that is more or less real. It is just different perspectives. Why did I start there? Because our text is a special one. It is an isolated, it is a solo story found in only one of the Gospels. No other gospel writer other than Luke records this moment. Like many of the stories in Scripture, here's what we realize, that there are a lot of things that we are unsure of about the text. In other words, we don't really know who these disciples are on the road, other than eventually we know that one of them is named Cleopas. Our boy Cleo, he must be the patriarch of the Tennessee and the Alabama Cleopases. We got old Cleo here. Some say the other disciple with him could have been Thomas. Some say that the other disciple could have been his wife. We don't know, but I want you to pause and sit with that today, because we don't know everybody's name, because I've discovered that God will often leave names out of Scripture so that you can put yours in. Because here's what I need to remind you of real quick, that the same God of the Bible is the same God of today, and that he had your name in mind too. Now, we also don't know much about this road to Emmaus either. We're unsure of its specific location. We don't know its geography. We're not quite sure of its total terrain. But if you take a tour in Israel, they will take you on a road that they presume is Emmaus, but they're not completely sure if that is the right road. Here's the point, that Emmaus is the road that these disciples are walking on after tragedy. Emmaus is the road that these disciples are walking on after heartache and pain and depression and disgust. Emmaus is the road that they're walking on where Jesus has died on a cross and they haven't heard from him. So Emmaus is seemingly a road of despair after Jesus' death. And this is why it's despair, because in case you didn't know, Jesus was executed. He was executed by the state. Let me teach the text that he was executed ethnically, because these Romans have now executed this Jew who is making too much commotion. He has also been executed religiously, because these Jews don't like the fact that he's claiming to be their Messiah. He's also been executed politically, because Pilate doesn't want to upset his constituency, so he puts Jesus on a cross. And the disciples are now on this road to Emmaus after they have watched their Savior, their friend, their companion be executed. Emmaus is that type of road you find yourself on when the worst thing in the world has happened to you. Emmaus literally means warm bath. Emmaus means warm bath. You know what I'm talking about, that bath with the bath bombs and the candles and the music. It is that type of bath that you soak in when you're suffering. It is that type of bath that you linger in. Emmaus is the road that we walk on when the unexpected happens. Emmaus is the road that we find ourselves on when we had plans and then they were interrupted. Emmaus is the road when we had our loved one here one moment and then they're gone the next. Emmaus is the road we are on when everything was going perfectly fine and then all of a sudden it wasn't. You know what I'm talking about. You didn't even ask for this disease to show up. You didn't ask to go through a divorce. You didn't ask for the death. You didn't ask to be laid off. You didn't ask for this trouble with your money. You didn't ask for any of this. And Emmaus is that road where they thought everything was about to be peaches and cream, and then everything went terribly wrong. That these disciples are on this road because they just thought Jesus was the answer to all of their problems, and then they look up and he's on a cross and in a tomb. And here's what's special. If you don't get anything else today, I hope you hear this moment right here, is that this is what we discover, that Jesus will show up on that road. Jesus shows up on that type of road. On the road where you feel like you're nothing and have nothing and lost everything, Jesus will show up. Now, I'm here to tell you, Jesus will meet you in that bathtub with those tears on your face, streaming down with no hope, and you don't know. Jesus will meet you when you're lingering in your limit. Jesus will show up when you feel worthless and nothing, and people have lied on you and talked about you. Jesus will show up on that road. He shows up, and when he shows up, Jesus the righteous, he doesn't even rush them to the revelation of the resurrection. He lingers with them in the lament. He gleans with them in the grotesque. He's willing to walk with them in their wounds. Because you also need to remember that Jesus will show up when you're well, and he'll show up when you're wounded. You need to know today that we serve a kind of God that doesn't just care about you when you're on the mountaintop. He will also care about you when you're in the valley. That Jesus will meet us when we're whole and when we're hurt and when we're hopeless. And maybe some of you are on that road today. Maybe like the disciples, you are wondering what in the world is after this, because life has not been exactly what you need it to be. Can I tell you, it's up from here. It is up from here. Regardless of how low you feel, Jesus has the ability to get you back up. And so he will meet us on the road. This is how he gets us up. 3 things, and I'll let you go. First, it's up because Jesus will reveal his presence. Jesus will reveal his presence. Verse 15 of the text says this: as they talked and discussed these things, Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them. The man who was dead comes alongside of them to remind them and to remind us that death was only temporary. That Jesus defeated death. In essence, then, we don't really transition from living to dying. We transition from dying to living. And Jesus shows up to make a point that regardless of the stage of life that we are in, Jesus is there with us. Okay, let me see if I can help you. My son has always been an incredible athlete. I'll never forget, he was a freshman in high school, and he was playing on the JV football team. When playoffs came around, they invited him and a few other people to move up and to be alternates, to be the substitute on the varsity level, to give them exposure for what was going to happen on the varsity level. It was an honor and it's a privilege. He knows his pops. His pops shows up to everything. And so he's wondering, okay, well, these games are traveling all across the state. Is he going to be able to make it? He understands Pop is busy. He's working. The first game was a home game. He's sitting there, and when the game happens, he begins to text us from the sideline. Look at this hit. Oh, my God, this catch. You had to see this spin move. I can't believe we made this mistake. He begins to text us and send us pictures of what is happening on the field. When the game is over and the text stops, I send him a text back. And I send him a video of him texting me what he wanted me to see. I sent him a text, and it's a video of him texting me about the play that he was texting me about. You could tell he was a little confused because the little bubbles pop up, and then they go away, and then they pop up, and then they go away, and then all of a sudden, I get this response from him that he says, wait, you were here? To when I responded, and I said this: just because you don't see me doesn't mean I'm not present. Just because you couldn't find me in the crowd, just because I didn't send you an alert when I walked into the stadium, didn't mean I didn't show up for you. No, I'm trying to remind some of you today that you say, I don't see him, I can't find him, I don't feel him. Can I encourage you that whether you recognize him or see him or not, the Lord is always there. At the moment of your greatest pain, he's there. At the moment of your highest promotion, he's there. When you feel him, he's there. The psalmist in Psalm 139 said it this way: I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell by the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me and your strength will support me. I could see the darkness and the light around me, but I cannot hide from you. Because in despair, Jesus is still there. He is an ever-present help in the time of trouble. That when the road seems tough, Jesus is with us. That when you are at the mountaintop of life, he's there. And he is there to remind us that we would be nothing and that we would have nothing without him. That it's up because his presence is there. Here's the second thing. We know it's up because his peace is there. Okay. Here we go. Verse 17 of the text says this. He asked them, "What are you discussing so intently as you walk along?" They stopped short, sadness written across their faces. Then one of them, Cleopas, good old Cleo, replied, "You must be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened there the last few days." Right after that, from verses 19 to 25, read it for lunch today, the disciples began telling Jesus everything that happened from Friday to Sunday. Here's the Emerson Standard Version. Jesus says, "What you discussing so intently?" They stopped short. Cleo says, "Bro, where you been?" Cleo says, "What rock have you been living under? Where are you from that you haven't heard everything that's been happening?" We could easily name Cleo and his disciples J.J., Michael, and Thelma. You know J.J., Michael, and Thelma from the 1974 show Good Times. Ain't we lucky we got them? Do-do-do-do-dum-dum. Come on, we have fun in church. You knew it's all right. We could easily name them. You know why I say that? Because everything seemed to go wrong for them. JJ would paint a painting. It would be great. He'd enter it in the competition. They'd say he won till they unveiled the painting and it wasn't his. Thelma would get a man. She got a good man. He's a football player. He tears his knees up. James got a job. It's supposed to be a good job. And then James dies. Every time they think things are going to change, they fail. That's how Israel feels in this moment. That they always feel like they come up short. And Jesus for them is the ultimate disappointment. That we had Abraham, he was the father of the faith, that didn't work. We had Isaac, he was the son of the faith, that didn't work. Jacob got his name changed to Israel, we became a nation, that didn't work. We were in bondage in Egypt, we came out, that didn't work. We were in the wilderness, that didn't work. We went to the promised land, that didn't work. We were in exile, that didn't work. We returned, that didn't work. Here comes Jesus. Here comes Jesus doing what Jesus does, and then all of a sudden he dies. These disciples, they give Jesus the gospel. Read verses 19 to 25. They give Jesus the gospel. They say, "You ain't heard about the one who was Joseph the carpenter's son, who was in the rabbi. He was a rabbi, and he was teaching at 12. He was in the temple when he was 30. He was making the lame to walk and the mute to talk and the deaf to hear and the blind." You didn't hear about the woman with the issue of blood who had been bleeding 12 years, and she touched the hem of his garment. And then you didn't hear about Jairus' daughter, that he was really going to see her when that woman interrupted him, and he still went to see the daughter and told her to get up and fix this baby. So you didn't hear about Lazarus. You had to hear about my boy Lazarus. That boy was stinking in the grave, and he had the nerve to tell him to come out, and the grave closed to loose him. And you don't know about Jesus, that they dragged him out of that garden and they took him to court and lied on him and spit on him and talked bad about him, that they ripped his flesh from his body and poured salt on his wounds and put that crown of thorns. You didn't hear about Jesus where Simon had carried that cross up that hill called Calvary. You didn't know about Jesus, the one that they stretched wide and hung high, and he pierced his side. You didn't hear about Jesus where they took him off that cross and put him in Joseph of Arimathea's tomb and laid him down. You didn't hear about Jesus, and now it's Sunday. Watch the text. Watch the text. That they literally talk about Friday to Sunday, and they still sad. It hasn't hit them that they're at Sunday afternoon. And Jesus goes off on them. He says, you foolish people, don't you remember what the Son of Man must suffer? Okay, I'm like, Jesus, come on now, Jesus. How are you fussing at these people and they miss you? How you fussing at these people and they love you and they telling your story? Because, watch this, Jesus will get you in check and make you feel better at the same time. We could call this a corrective peace. Because, watch, peace always comes when what you think happened didn't actually happen. Okay. Let me see if I can help him, Liddell. I was pastoring in West Texas several years ago. We had just run through our pre-service meeting. Our executive producer told us that we were done. I was going to go to my office and change my clothes, and all of a sudden, my phone started ringing off the hook. My wife runs upstairs. She said, babe, the alarm company is calling. The burglar alarm is going off. The police say they're on their way to the house. I look at my team and say, y'all going to have to figure it out. I'll be back as soon as I can. I got to get to my house. I jump in my car, break the law, get home. The police are waiting on me at the house. They say, Mr. Emerson, let us go in first. I said, that sounds good. They go in, they check the house, they looking at everything, they find it. They say, Mr. Emerson, will you come in for a second? Yes, sir. They said, we don't see anything wrong. We don't see anything taken. We don't see anything damaged. What we notice here is your back door has been pushed ajar some. You might want to get that deadbolt adjusted a little bit because it's windy here in West Texas, and the wind blew your door open. This is what they were trying to tell me. We know we, the police, are here, and you thought somebody broke in, but what you thought happened didn't happen. It was just the wind pushing through the door. I'm going to say it again. We know you flew here because you thought your stuff was stolen and your house was damaged and you wouldn't be able to come back home after church. But we're here to tell you what you thought happened didn't happen. And so I had peace. I got back in my car and I went back to the church and I preached. And that's what happens to the disciples because they thought it was over. They told the story and they thought they were done. They thought they were at the end of the story. And just as they were telling it, Luke chapter 24, verse 36, it says, and just as they were telling about it, Jesus himself was suddenly standing there among them. They had got to Sunday and didn't see Jesus. So Jesus shows up and says, peace be with you. And this is how he gives them peace. Watch. Jesus doesn't give them a fresh revelation. Jesus doesn't give them a new word. Jesus doesn't even remind them of what he said. He tells them, don't you remember what the prophet said? In other words, this is what Jesus says. Jesus says, history told you what would happen. This is what he's telling them. He's saying, the password was enough for your present wounds. In other words, this is what he's trying to say. He's trying to say that what was said in the book is enough. Okay, in other words, maybe many of us in here today, we don't need a fresh word. We need to remember the old one. Can I encourage you for a minute? Because this is why maybe you need to hold on to the old word. Because what you did didn't change what he said. No, anybody want to be real with me today? I know you messed up. I know you made some mistakes and you haven't been the best human being you can be and you have gone to some places you shouldn't have gone. That still didn't change what he said. I know you haven't always done the right thing. That doesn't change what he said. Let me say it another way. Where you been doesn't change what he said. The locations you have found yourself in don't change what he said. Maybe you don't like that one. Who you are doesn't change who he is. I don't care how you try to label yourself or how you feel about yourself. Can I tell you, the Lord loves you just as you are. The Lord made you and formed you and loves you and cares about you. And regardless of what you've been through, it doesn't change who he is. So the Lord is telling them that the proclamation from the prophets should have gave them peace presently, because Jesus is the Prince of Peace. That even when he speaks in correction, it brings comfort. Why? Why in the world would correction bring comfort? Because the Lord should have killed them, but he chose to correct them. You got to understand that the punishment for sin was death. And instead of the Lord killing us, he chose to correct us and die for us. That's why, because the truth of Jesus' words outweigh the trauma of our wounds. Isaiah chapter 26, verse 3, this is what the prophet said that they should have remembered, that you will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you. In other words, you got to keep your mind on him. Not on the madness, not on the problem, not on the issue, not on the doctor's report, not on the situation. You got to keep your mind on him. When I was a little boy, my sister and my parents used to get irritated by something, because I'd be sitting in their lap, or I would stand by them, and I'd say, Mommy, Daddy, Deidre, Tony. They would get irritated because I'd call them, and they wouldn't answer. And when they wouldn't answer, I would grab their face, and I would turn their face towards me. I didn't care who they were talking to. God help me. I didn't care who else was in the room. I didn't care if they were in a meeting. I don't care what setting it is. I need your attention. And because you're not answering me, I would reach over and grab their face. You got to learn how to grab your own face sometime. You got to learn how, you ain't supposed to answer that call. You shouldn't be talking to them. You shouldn't be entertaining this. Turn your face. You need to quit looking at the problem and the pain and the report. Turn your face. You need to quit worrying about the mess and the misery and the mishap. Turn your face. You better turn your own face and say, no, I will keep my eyes on Jesus. That I won't keep talking to the pain, but I'll talk to the peace. Here we go. Let's go home. Jesus shows up on the road. It's Easter Sunday. He shows up on the road of despair. He shows up on the road where they are at their lowest to tell them it's up from here. And it's up because he reveals his presence. He reveals his peace. And finally, he reveals his promises. Verse 31 and 32 of the text say this: as they sat down to eat, he took bread and blessed it. Then he broke it and gave it to them. Suddenly their eyes were opened and they recognized him. At that moment, he disappeared. They said to each other, watch what they said, didn't our hearts burn within us as he talked with us on the road and explained the scriptures to us? The text says that he disappears and their eyes are open. It isn't until he is gone from their face that they see him. And when he is gone from their face, the text says their hearts burned. Okay, here we go. That word burned is the same burn from the bush in Exodus 3. That word burn is the same burn from the incense altar at the temple. That same burn is the same burn that Jeremiah felt when it was fire shut up in his bones. That same burn is the same fire from Isaiah's prophecy. Because what has happened for them is that they are feeling a fire of fulfillment. In case you didn't know, Jesus is the fulfillment of everything. Everything that came before him, Jesus fulfills. Jesus is the law. He is the written word made flesh walking around. Jesus fulfills Genesis because he is the seed of the woman. He fulfills Exodus because he is the one who sets the captives free. He fulfills Leviticus because he is the sacrifice of the great high priest. He fulfills Numbers because he is the way out of the wilderness. He fulfills Deuteronomy because he is the epitome of the curse. He fulfills the prophets. He fulfills all of their words and all of their works. He is Nehemiah's wall builder. He is Ezekiel's wheel in the middle of a wheel. He is the fourth man in the fire with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He is the lion's bridle in Daniel. He is the worship of the psalmist and the adoration of David. Jesus is fulfillment. And when he fulfills everything, he has to fulfill one more thing. The text says that they share a meal. That he takes the bread, that he takes it, he blesses it, he breaks it, he gives it. He takes it, he blesses it, he breaks it, he gives it. These four actions suggest that when they witnessed Jesus do this, their eyes were open because they had seen Jesus do this before. They remember Jesus breaking bread when the 4,000 were fed. They remember Jesus breaking bread when the 5,000 were fed. They remember Jesus breaking bread at the Last Supper meal. And they realize Jesus is consistent. I feel my help. What God purposes for us doesn't disappear when you find yourself in despair. Because even when you're down, the promise is still up. That what God wants to do often has a downward path in your life. You need to never rush to promise and skip process and pain. Because even when you die, what God purposes for you doesn't die with you. That's the hope of eternity, y'all. That's the reason why 12 people got baptized today. Because their hope is not simply in this world. Their hope is in a world to come. Can I tell you that life has the tendency to make you feel like all you're doing is going down, down, down. You must have missed it because that was the picture we were painting the entire month of March. When we talked about fear making you go down, and stress making you go down, and depression making you go down, and grief making you go down. No, come here, because we saw the fear of Mary having a baby as a virgin. We see the stress of Joseph raising a child that's not his. We see the anxiety of Jesus in the garden not wanting to go to the cross. We see the depression of the disciples on this road, but here's what we find out. It's up from here. You got to understand that Jesus' whole story is about going down, down, down. That Jesus goes down in that courtroom. He goes down into that whipping. He goes down on that cross. He goes down on that tomb. And then he gets up because it's up from here. You say, well, that's Jesus. And he's God. And I'm not Jesus. Well, can I introduce you to Jonah? Because in Jonah chapter 1 verse 2, it said Jonah went down to the port of Joppa. He went down into a ship. He went down into the bottom of a ship. That he went down into the water. He went down into the belly of a whale. And when he was on his back with no hope, feeling like he had lost it all, Jonah chapter 2 verse 6 says, I went down to the land whose bars closed up on me forever, yet you brought up my life from the pit, oh Lord my God. Okay, that's fine. You don't like Jonah either. Well, I'll get happy all by myself. Because let me tell you about me. Frederick Buckner once said that Jesus' resurrection means that the worst thing is never the last thing. I need to press pause, rewind, say that again. That resurrection means that the worst thing is never the last thing. Maybe I'm by myself, but I've been through the worst thing. God, hold me up. I've been through the worst thing physically. With H-flu meningitis in my body, with a disease that should have killed me, when the doctor said that I would either be dead or disabled. I know about the worst thing physically, when I was driving 78 miles per hour on the freeway and a kidney stone showed up and I ran my truck into the guardrail. I know about the worst thing physically, when shingles had covered me from the top of my head to the bottom of my chest, when shingles was in my eye and the optometrist and the ophthalmologist said you'll never see out of your right eye again. I know about the worst thing financially, when we weren't getting paid and I was in debt and my lights were off and I was sitting in Bank of America begging them to let me make my late payment and not foreclose on my house. I know about the worst thing in my family, when my brother died of a rare cancer that only affects those with the sickle cell trait. I know about the worst thing relationally, when I was young and dumb and divorced. I know about the worst thing socially, when I was just coming out of a convenience store in West Texas and a truck pulled up and pulled out a shotgun and put it in my face and said, N-word, I ought to kill you where you stand. I know about the worst thing emotionally, when I was sitting in a therapist's office. I was depressed, begging for medicine, told myself I'd never preach again, told myself I'd never pastor again. I'm done. But on today, on my 41st birthday, I found out that the worst thing is never the last thing. I found out that it doesn't matter how bad it gets, that God can get you up, that you might be down in your marriage and down in your finances and down in your body and down on your job, and when you got your back to the wall and your face to the sky, you need to remember that it's up from here. I wish I had some real people in here who can say, I know what it is to go through some things. I know what it is to be brokenhearted. I know what it is to feel like I've lost it all. I'm here to tell you it's up from here. It's up from here. It's up from here. I don't care what the enemy told you before you got here today. The devil is a liar. I don't care what you heard somebody else tell you today, that it'll never get better, or that you won't be different than your daddy, or that you won't come through this, or that it won't get better, or that your mama won't get healed. It's up from here. I don't care what lie they tried to tell you were worth nothing and would never be nothing and would never have nothing. The devil is a lie. It's from here. I don't care if you sold dope, if you did dope, and if you got the dope in your pocket right now. It's up from here. I don't care if you drunk when you got here and if you tempted to get drunk when you leave. It's up from here. I don't care how many kids or baby mamas or baby fathers you have. It can be up from here, because Jesus got on that cross with your mind. Jesus got on that cross with your name in mind. Jesus got on that cross with your name in mind. Jesus got on that cross just for you. That it's up. It's up from here.